Hey everyone! Today we're jumping headfirst into one of the most high-stakes scenarios in all of medicine, managing a severe head injury. The second that ambulance arrives, a clock starts ticking. So, what happens next? Let's get into it.
You've probably heard of the golden hour. Well, this is it. It's that critical first 60 minutes where literally every single decision can change a person's entire life. We're going to break down the playbook, the step-by-step protocol that emergency teams use to bring order to that chaos.
Okay, so first things first. Before they can even think about the head injury itself, the team has to lock down the absolute basics of keeping the patient alive. And that all starts with the universal checklist, the ABCs.
So A, B, C. Airway, breathing, circulation. It sounds simple, right? But look closer at A. It's not just about getting air in. It's about protecting the airway and immobilizing the neck at the same time. Why? Because a serious head injury often means a serious neck injury. One wrong move, and you could be talking about permanent paralysis. After that's secure, it's on to B, breathing, pumping in oxygen. And then C, circulation, which means stopping any bleeding and getting fluids in to keep blood pressure up.
All right, now this might sound a little backward. Sometimes to save the brain, doctors will actually make the patient breathe faster. They'll hyperventilate them. Why on earth would they do that? Well, when you do that, you wash out carbon dioxide from the blood, and that little chemical trick makes the blood vessels in the brain shrink. In a skull that's swelling with dangerous pressure, smaller vessels mean less volume, and that can be just enough to relieve that life-threatening pressure. It's a really clever, delicate balancing act.
So amidst all this chaos, how does the team get a quick, objective score of just how bad the injury is? That's where the Glasgow Coma Scale, or GCS, comes in. Think of it as a quick 15-point quiz for the brain, checking how the patient responds with their eyes, their voice, and their movements. And there's a magic number here, 8. If the score is 8 or less, that's critical. It's an automatic red flag that says, we need to intubate this person right now and take over their breathing.
Okay, so once the ABCs are stable, the mission shifts. The life-saving part is underway, and now the detective work begins. The team starts a rapid-fire investigation, looking for any and all clues to figure out what's really going on inside that skull.
And one of the first places they look for clues is memory. They'll ask simple questions. Can you remember what happened before the accident? If there's a gap there, that's retrograde amnesia, and a bigger gap can sometimes mean a bigger injury. Then they'll check, can you remember things that are happening now? If you can't form new memories, that's anterograde amnesia. Each one of these is a crucial piece of the puzzle.
All right, beyond memory, the team starts hunting for physical clues. We're talking about very specific, telltale signs on the body that scream, hey, look over here, the problem is right here.
And this is wild. One of the first things they do is just feel. A doctor will carefully run their gloved hands over the patient's scalp. They're feeling for what's called a step deformity. It's exactly what it sounds like, a literal step where one piece of a fractured skull is pushed down or up. You can't get a more direct confirmation of a fracture than that.
Then you have this, the classic panda eyes. Now what's so important to know is that this isn't from getting punched in the eyes. This bruising is a sign of something much deeper. It means there's likely a fracture at the base of the skull, and blood is leaking all the way from the floor of the skull forward into the eye sockets. Seeing this is a major, major red flag.
And here's the companion sign to panda eyes. If you see bruising behind the ear, that's called battle sign. This points to a fracture in a different spot, in the temporal bone on the side of the head. When you see panda eyes and battle sign together, that paints a very clear and very serious picture of a major fracture at the base of the skull.
Now this phrase, it's one of the most chilling in medicine. It describes a terrifyingly deceptive scenario called the lucid interval. A person takes a hit to the head. They get up, they're walking, they're talking, they seem perfectly fine, and then suddenly they collapse. It's often caused by a slow bleed in the brain that's just building and building pressure until it's catastrophic. This is exactly why any head injury needs to be taken seriously, even if the person seems okay.
So, with all these clues, the GCS score, the amnesia, the physical signs, it all builds to one critical question. Is it time to see what's actually going on inside? In other words, when do we scan?
Well, there's no guesswork here. It's a strict checklist. If the GCS is less than 13, you get a scan. If there's any suspicion of a skull fracture, like that step deformity or panda eyes, you get a scan. Seizures, vomiting more than once, scan. Any one of these things triggers an immediate, high-priority trip to the CT scanner, typically within the hour. It's non-negotiable.
And let's not forget about the neck. It gets its own separate but just as critical checklist. If the GCS is low, or if the patient had to be intubated, or if they complain of any tingling in their arms or legs, that's an automatic trigger for a CT of the neck. You absolutely have to rule out a spinal injury. That could change everything.
So at a certain point, the injury might be too severe for the ER team to handle alone. That's when they have to make the call, when they bring in the specialists. So what are the absolute red lines that trigger an immediate page to neurosurgery?
Here they are. If that GCS score is stuck at 8 or less and isn't getting better, you make the call. If it's actively dropping, you make the call. Any kind of penetrating injury, something that physically breaks through the skull, that's an automatic consult. And if you see clear fluid leaking from the nose or ears, that could be cerebral spinal fluid, meaning the very lining around the brain is torn. That's a 5-alarm fire right there.
So let's say the team navigates that golden hour perfectly. The immediate crisis is under control, but the journey is far from over. The focus now shifts to the road ahead and the potential complications, both immediate and, well, much later on.
And this really breaks it down well. In the short term, you're worried about things like bleeding on the brain, those extradural or subdural hemorrhages, and seizures. But look at the long-term column. The battle can continue for years. We're talking about a higher risk of seizures for the rest of their life, hormonal problems, and even devastating conditions that look a lot like Parkinsonism or dementia. The initial injury is just the beginning. And unfortunately, some factors can point towards a tougher road to recovery. Being older is one. Being in a coma for a long time, or having that stubbornly high pressure inside the skull, those are all bad signs. But one of the most ominous signs of all is something called decerebrate rigidity. It's a specific involuntary posture where the arms and legs go stiff and straight out. It's a sign that the damage has reached the brainstem, which is just incredibly severe.
Which brings us back to this number, 15, the best possible score you can get on that Glasgow Coma Scale. It's the benchmark, it's the very first data point in this whole complex, high-speed chain of decisions that is all designed for one thing, to save a life.
When you step back and look at it, it's pretty incredible. This isn't just a bunch of doctors and nurses running around. From the ABCs all the way to the CT scanner, it's a meticulously designed protocol. It's a system built to impose order on absolute chaos, a roadmap for a journey where every single second counts.
It really makes you think, right? These medical protocols are these incredible, invisible systems that allow people to perform under the most intense pressure imaginable. It begs the question, what other invisible systems are at work all around us, quietly keeping everything from falling apart?